And we are live. Hello, welcome, welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Hello, everyone. So sorry about the technical difficulties this morning. I think we'll give you guys just a few more minutes to get logged on. Thank you so much to everyone who is joining us. We're super excited to have some awesome folks from UNESCO, UNICEF, and the UN joining us today to talk a little bit more about the social impact category. So we'll just give it 1 or 2 more minutes. I know Patrick was going to drop in the Discord. We'll see you all on here. Hello, everyone. So, sorry, some echo from the YouTube live stream there. I'll be following along on YouTube as well. So if anyone has questions for our panelists, just drop them in on the comments box and we will get to them at the end. So I know we have a hard stop here in a little bit at 1:15 Eastern time. So let's jump into it. So hi, everyone. I'm Mickey Graham. I'm on the team at Chainlink Labs. We are super excited to have you here today. Most of you probably know this given we've been hacking away for the past week now, but in case we have anyone tuning in for the first time, Chainlink Labs is the largest organization building the Chainlink decentralized Oracle protocol. Chainlink, the protocol, supplies off-chain data to smart contracts. You can use Chainlink oracles to build all sorts of financial, insurance, NFT, and universally connected smart contracts with any types of data sets you can imagine. Chainlink's explicit goal is to create a more economically fair world. And one area of smart contract development we're super excited about is in social impact and innovation that leads to tangible improvements in everyday life, especially in emerging markets and for vulnerable populations. In keeping with that mission, we are really excited to have launched a new hackathon prize category focused on social impact in partnership with UNESCO's Global Education Coalition. Today, we're going to be spending some time talking about that category and areas of opportunities for smart contracts in emerging markets with our friends from UNESCO, the UN, and UNICEF. So to kick us off, can we just go around and hear a little bit about your organizations and your roles? Val, Jonathan, Christina, would love if you could all just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you're working on. So Christina, maybe we'll start with you.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me. So hi, everyone. My name's Christina. I lead our blockchain work within the Office of Innovation at UNICEF. We're a team who looks at how emerging technologies could impact the way that UNICEF operates in the next 3 to 5 years. And so we have a venture fund that makes early stage investments into startups in emerging or developing economies in the area of obviously blockchain, data science, drones, virtual reality. And we provide both funding and mentorship to those startups. But our team within the Office of Innovation also builds internal prototypes with our UNICEF country offices. UNICEF works in over 190 different countries, and some of those offices are interested in exploring where blockchain can make a difference. And so our team is here to support those explorations. Thanks for having me today.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. How about yourself, Jonathan?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Jonathan. I've been working in UN and UNESCO for the last 10 years, trying to identify how to link technology. So traditional technology, new technology, the ones that were not invented yet, to address social and environmental challenges. So we're very happy to be here and share some ideas, share some challenges, and looking forward to see some solutions and alternatives in the next days.
Awesome. And Val, how about yourself?
Thank you, Mickey. Thanks a lot for having us. And it's a pleasure to be here as well as UNESCO. And I'm involved in ICT in education and innovation and education. I have been working for 10 years or 15 years on this field. And in UNESCO, we are in the education sector. As you know, is the UN organization dedicated to education, culture, and science. And we are in the educational sector. And we are very excited to be working with the Global Education Coalition. That is this new mechanism that we put in place to try to respond to the challenges we are having surrounding the COVID-19. So everything that is happening with the school and with the learning environment. So I'm very happy to be here, and we can talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Thank you.
Awesome. So before we get started, I'd love to hear about each of your paths down the crypto rabbit hole. I found that crypto attracts such a vast group of people for so many different reasons with such different perspectives. You have the libertarians and the self-sovereign money folks, people who believe in the power of decentralized system and communities, people who believe in data ownership and privacy, people from traditional tech backgrounds who see 10x improvements in financial infrastructure, artists and NFTs with royalties, people who love to, and see the power in trust minimized systems. So I'm curious kind of if each of you can just tell me a little bit about, how you approach crypto, what your path down the rabbit hole has been, and where you are in your journey. So Christina, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. I don't know that anyone has a traditional path down the rabbit hole, but mine started back in 2013 when I worked at a central bank. And that's where I was first introduced to the concept of crypto, strangely enough. And I went on to do my master's and spent a year researching the success factors of crypto and then looking at how banks were responding to blockchain and crypto specifically from a global perspective. And what really interested me was the shift in structures and traditional systems that blockchain introduced. And so I actually worked for a few years with various government clients who were looking at implementing blockchain within government, within multiple layers of governments. And that was really exciting. And so working with one government to moving that to a UN context where we're looking at multiple governments and how we can best support different governments in using innovative technologies, that's what was really exciting. For me, blockchain has always been about having conversations about how to do things differently. And within the context of UNICEF, we look at blockchain as having three big possible benefits. One is redistributing resources in new and innovative ways. The second is how to increase transparency and efficiency in systems. And the third is how to incentivize and maintain the creation of open source digital public goods. So new types of application and things like that. And yeah, blockchain is kind of the foundation to those three benefits.
Jonathan, how about yourself?
So from my side, as I said, our idea is to start with the challenge. So with the difficulties and let's call it the challenges that remain unsolved and probably will be unsolved for a long time, and try to translate that into opportunities in new technologies. So in the case of blockchain, for example, we started doing some piloting applied to education and environment. And seeing, according to the characteristics, what is the challenge that we see there that maybe would benefit with increased encryption or addition of smart contract processes, and then looking into pilots that could prove that could be an alternative. The approach that we try to take from the beginning is not technologies looking for a challenge to respond to technology, but the other way around. Let's see what needs some new technology that could be solved with the current approach, and then use blockchain and try to address that, and then see if that works.
Awesome. And Val, how about yourself?
Thank you. From our perspective, blockchain is part of the social innovation, let's say, strategy. So in the same way we are looking at AI, for example, that UNESCO has been working very strongly. We are starting, I would say, a couple of years only trying to take a look in the blockchain and the smart contract. But from our perspective, that is also the education sector, it's our values, and it's very linked, obviously, to UNICEF's approach as well in terms of transparency. For example, when we look at AI, for us is key the transparency of algorithms, the ethic dimension as well. So I think blockchain comes already in its technical way with a lot of solutions that connect very well with this mission that we have. So for us is actually, as Jonathan was mentioning, take a look at the challenges and see how this new technology can actually support us to respond to these challenges. So, and we'll be talking maybe a little later. And we have, before COVID, already more than 600 million children and young people that were not learning. They were not having the basics skills in terms of literacy and numeracy. So how blockchain and all the frontier technologies can respond or can help to tackle this kind of challenge. So this for us is key. And we have some examples, and also in terms of how we can bring some knowledge sharing, and we can bring teachers and the education community towards this domain, and try to understand together what this can, how it can impact in their daily lives and in their profession. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Val. And just a reminder to everyone to please drop your questions in the YouTube live stream. I'll write them down, any questions that come in, and we'll save some time at the end to answer them. So Tanner from Kazakhstan, I see you. We will try to get to any questions if you guys have them. So moving forward, Val, earlier this year, Chainlink joined UNESCO's Global Education Coalition to help advance smart contract education globally. Can you just tell the audience a little bit about the Global Education Coalition and your 3 flagships?
Sure, thanks, Miki. So basically, when the crisis started, when COVID started, so UNESCO created this coalition that was to give some response, immediate response to the crisis. First, we started measuring how many schools, how many students were impacted for the school closures. So in one point, we had 1.6 billion students impacted by the schools or learning environments closure. So this obviously brings a lot of social challenge because for many of the learners, having the school closed, it means a lack of, even in terms of nutrition, in terms of food, in terms of social environment, to bring other dimensions of the learning that is not just the daily content that is shown and taught in a classroom environment. So having this in mind, we created this coalition that what it did was bring the private sector, other UN organizations, civil society, to see how we could work together to respond to the crisis. So some examples, we together actually with the UNICEF and the World Bank, we created a consortium that with funds from GPE, we are right now implementing a program that is in different parts of the world to try to answer. In which way? Via some programs and via some research. So for us, it's important to take a look how this crisis will impact in the whole education system, and how we can already bring some programs to try to help and support countries to respond. So you mentioned 3 flagships. So our 3 main focus is the first one, connectivity. So for us, it's important to bring solutions in terms of connectivity. And here we also have the blockchain dimension, because it's not just the internet, is how we can bring this student that sometimes are offline. So what kind of innovation we can have to support them. So here, connectivity is very broad, and we can talk more if we have other opportunities. The second one is teachers. We realize that teachers are the backbone of the whole education system. And we knew this before, but with the crisis, we saw that teachers need to really be flexible, really very quickly to adapt to the new circumstances and bring different ways of continue this learning. So for this reason, for us, is key to support them, to bring capacity building, etc., to this very important frontier workers that we have right now. And I think we should be very thankful for the work they have been doing. And the third one is the gender dimension, because our research is saying that women and girls, they are much more impacted for this kind of crisis. So we have a lot of challenges here as well. So we are launching other hackathons like this one, specifically dedicated for girls and women. And we have a lot of actions here as well. So these are the three main flagships, and I'm happy to continue later, explain a little bit more. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Val. That was super insightful and helpful context. So Jonathan, maybe just expanding on Val and the three categories he was mentioning as it relates to connectivity, education, and gender equality. Can you share some opportunities you see for blockchain-enabled technology to help address these problems?
Sure. Actually, we wanted also to just throw some ideas, but again, it's just from our perspective, we're completely open for disruptive and out-of-the-box ideas. One clear, contribution of blockchain is killing the middleman. So how to make cheaper connectivity or broader connectivity by taking some elements out of the way. The context that we want to bring connectivity to is for the most vulnerable. So, and this changes a lot depending on the context and the geography. Just from my country, so I'm Brazilian. So the configuration there of vulnerable people, we have, let's say, people in remote locations, but also in the next block. So in favelas, in shanty towns, you're living on the side, like the next block is a very, let's say, a vulnerable learner. If we can make cheaper connectivity that wouldn't include, let's say, a large infrastructure, because the infrastructure is already there, but the access to that, then we have, let's say, a clear opportunity of expanding connectivity and making it cheaper, since you don't require large infrastructure that works as it would be to take internet connection to a remote location. So this would be, let's say, one of the areas. Then in relation to education, we have a lot of discussions and some pilots already on utilizing blockchain for increasing reliability on certificates. Even in the refugee context, how to ensure that this certificate or a credential can be trusted in different contexts. We know of the ongoing climate crisis. We're going to increase even more the population of refugees and people moving from places. So this is really something that could gain from blockchain potential on increasing trust and smart contracts to validate such certificates. And then finally, in relation to gender equality, I mean, we're as a general feeling on the technological industry, we're missing out on half of the potential population that can work and bring knowledge to technology development. So as Val said, we have lots of activities to bring women to the forefront of technology, and we want to see, that I mean, we want to use the whole population knowledge to design inclusive technologies. And having, for example, having Christina in this panel today, it sends a message. We're 4 people, only 1 is female. I don't know how many people are looking at watching us. We should have a half-half, So this is really important to realize and include. Everyone into designing that technology. So then any biases that could be included in the code has less chances to be transmitted to the code and replicated and then go into a snowball. Maybe those were these suggestions to include, to tackle through blockchain. But again, we're looking for new ideas.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. So Christina, I think your team is on the front lines of overseeing blockchain and cryptocurrency initiatives for UNICEF, having first launched the crypto fund in 2019. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the startups and projects specifically blockchain enabled that you've backed and invested in? I think I saw one, Project Connect, which was similar to what Jonathan and Val have been talking about with connectivity in emerging markets. Can you tell us a little bit more about that work and some of your other projects?
Sure. So, and I think we've been talking about these cross-cutting challenges that blockchain looks to solve. And so I might just summarize what I've heard so far and then give some specific examples of investments that we've made in those areas. So the cross-cutting challenges that blockchain ultimately looks to solve, that at least we've seen, is there's a lack of credible, coordinated, and timely information across systems. There's also many intermediary in systems that make them inefficient and costly. And individuals are not fairly and equally represented in all systems, and they don't have equal opportunities. And finally, is the point that Jonathan was just talking about, is that products and services are not built for different types of users. And these are things that we need to think about as we think about blockchain solutions specifically. So I mentioned before that UNICEF Innovation has a venture fund, and so far we've made 7 investments into blockchain companies. And I'll highlight a few of those investments that we've made to date. So one company would be OS City. They are a startup based in Mexico, and they look to work with governments to digitize various processes, but particularly around transparency of information. And so one of the use cases that they've worked on are digital certificates within various government contexts, so that you have that immutability, that transparency, the ability to verify credentials at any point in time. Another startup that we've worked with is Statwig, which is a startup based in India, and they've done vaccine and food supply chain tracking. So if you think of that in the context of vaccines, we all know now, living in this COVID era, that some vaccines must stay cold through its entire supply chain. And so Statwig actually works with various IoT devices to capture information throughout the supply chain process, to create a common set of information across distributors, recipients, transporters, so that everyone is working off the same set of information. And the last example that I would give you in terms of our external investment would be W3 Engineers. And this is a company based in Bangladesh, and they work on a connectivity solution. So if I have 1 gigabyte of data for the month, but I know I'm only going to need half of that, I might be able to resell half of my data to those in my community through a mesh network, and this is all blockchain enabled as well, to be able to give access in low connectivity areas. So W3 particularly works in refugee camps, being able to provide connectivity to those who don't have connectivity. And finally, I'll give a UNICEF specific example. We've also worked with our UNICEF Kazakhstan office, who looked at using blockchain to streamline the process around managing vendors and also paying vendors. So being able to get transparency around the flow of sign-off, but also the flow of funds to partners that UNICEF works with. So that's a quick example of some of the projects we've invested in the last little while.
That's great. That's super helpful context. And I love the way you frame it around, the different applicable, situations. So I think just building on that a little bit, a lot of the people in this hackathon are probably really familiar with DeFi, NFTs, but are less familiar with some of the core social impact use cases of distributed ledger technology, which you were just kind of going into and outlining some of the projects who are working in these areas. Besides some of those startups you mentioned, what do you see as kind of the emerging applications or use cases that you are particularly excited about?
Sorry, I have a little dog who's outside who's barking at someone walking by. The joys of working from home. So in terms of use cases that we are seeing, I would say we tend to bring it back to what are the core functionalities of blockchain. And we see that as blockchain being a ledger for information, blockchain being a ledger to transact value, and blockchain being a way to gain efficiencies in various systems. And we typically see use cases fall in 1, maybe 2 of those buckets. The things that really excite me in terms of various social impact applications that we've seen, one that I would highlight, and we've mentioned briefly, is the UNICEF Crypto Fund. So back in 2019, UNICEF became the first UN entity to use cryptocurrency as cryptocurrency. So when we receive donations in Bitcoin or Ether, we don't convert them into fiat. We actually then make investments into companies using Bitcoin and Ether. And so we keep that transparency through the entire process where funds come in crypto, we can see it on a blockchain using a block explorer, and we can see the investment then go to the startup. We can even take that a level further and say, we've given the investment to the companies. Can we actually see the line by line payment of what are they spending these funds on? And so within UNICEF, we built a set of tools and a new website to try and make the technology more accessible to the general public. Not everyone knows how to read a block explorer. We tend to make block explorers a little bit scary for the general public. So we've tried to make it a little bit more accessible and really tell the story of transparency of the crypto fund. So fundamentally, I think the transfer of value, that's a use case we saw way back when Bitcoin was introduced. And that's something that still excites me now. And that we're starting to see those use cases within the context of the UN. And then the things that come along with the transfer of value use cases, such as access to different financial services that people otherwise wouldn't have access to. So the various DeFi protocols that are coming out now, but also something just as basic as having access to an interest-bearing account. So I have a small amount of crypto. What can I do with it? Can I earn a little bit of interest on it? Even being able to put that into, you don't need 32 ETH to stake. You can put that into a pool and be able to earn a little bit of interest on that, or some other type of protocol where you're earning interest. So that bringing it back to the core benefits that we see of blockchain and those really simple applications, I think those are the ones that we're seeing as being the most powerful right now and the most accessible to the largest group.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing. So Val, I think, when a lot of us look at the United Nations, we see this extraordinarily complex system with 50 agencies, commissions, programs, governing bodies, and dozens of crypto projects. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the interesting blockchain-based work you've seen going on around the organization?
Thanks, Miki. I think Christina, she's much more knowledgeable with the rest of the blockchain adventures that we have in the UN, but I can mention a couple that we have in UNESCO that we have been starting. So one, for example, is with UNESCO Bangkok. They are using blockchain to incentivize and automate students' assessment. As you know, students' assessment is a huge field for blockchain because we want to innovate. Is a big challenge there that we have. So this initiative is trying to verify students' learning results through smart contracts. So I think, and the challenge we have in terms of storing rules and verifying rules and how to self-executing rules when we come to the assessment. So this is one experience, and please feel free to contact our colleagues in Bangkok. Then we have a second one that is also there in that region, that is a project that is learning coin project that also tries to support and tackle one of our biggest challenges in education, that is the early dropout. And we know now with COVID, our research is showing that potentially we can have 24 million of students dropping out of the system because of the interruption they have now due to COVID. So what this project does is basically promoting learning habits through data analytics and cash transfers for refugees or disadvantaged community in Thailand. So it's, once again, we want to see how we can incentivize those students via cash transfer to make them to continue in the education system, because we know that part of the cause that we have for these early leavers is because they need to go home and help with some work to bring some funds to the families that they need. So in this way, we think that with this system we can help to avoid this kind of situation. So this is a second example. And then through the UNESCO work, for example, we have a big event that is coming this year, that is the World Conference on Higher Education. So we'll be exploring these issues as well as part of the innovative aspect of the conference. So we invite you as well to join. And then we have a big area that is the UNESCO qualifications passport for refugees. That is an initiative that is part of a declaration we have for the right to education. And here we are right now working, and we have some colleagues working with the European Qualification Passport team as well to try to bring some blockchain and some the digital credentials to this domain as well. Because as you saw, is a huge challenge how we can recognize these qualifications that this particular community they had and they lost. And I think this challenge can also be a very important inspiration to innovate in the regular education system. Because I think to have a paper with our certificate nowadays is completely and doesn't make any sense. So here is also an invitation. I think this is a field that we can all work together to improve it. So I will stop here. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Val. So Christina, shifting a little bit back to some of the use cases, functionalities you described, specifically as it relates to the hackathon and some projects the developers who are listening to this chat are thinking through. Can you talk about some use cases that you've seen that would be particularly well suited for Oracle networks, or more generally, kind of how do you imagine Oracle networks and off-chain data playing into some of these systems you described?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And the project that I would use as or a challenge that I would use as one of the examples for this is the Project Connect platform that you mentioned before, and I didn't dive into, so I'm going to take the opportunity now. And I saw some questions come up through the YouTube chat that are asking about how do individuals get access to blockchain or oracles or anything in this space if they don't have access to the internet to start with or hardware to start with. And one of the projects that was launched now about 2 years ago between UNICEF and ITU is a project called Giga. And it looks to bring universal connectivity to schools and school communities particularly. And there is one platform called Project Connect, which is a map that looks to identify where schools are located in each country, but also the connectivity of each of those schools. And when you see this on a map, it gives you a good idea of what type of education do you need to deliver in a particular part of a country? Is there connectivity? Is there not? Where do you need to respond when there's an emergency? So knowing where schools are and if they're connected is incredibly powerful. So the blockchain team here at UNICEF started to look at where could blockchain and crypto play a role in bringing connectivity to communities. We know that once there is connectivity, obviously there's a whole bunch of opportunities, and we've talked about those already today. So I'm not going to focus on those. But where can blockchain at the onset help bring connectivity to a community? And so we looked at the Project Connect platform and said, there's a few different use cases here for blockchain and crypto. The first is obviously to actually fund connectivity. So once we know where a school is, can we take a school that has no connectivity and can we turn connectivity on using crypto? So transparent payment, you see the payment go in, maybe it's held in a multi-sig, you then see the payment go to a connectivity provider, and then you see the school connectivity turn on. And when I say see the connectivity turn on, I'm talking about real-time data from that school. So you either have a Chrome extension or a probe that is giving real-time information from a school about that school being connected and about what type of connectivity, because the type of education you're going to deliver at 1 megabit per second is a little different than what you're going to deliver at 10 megabits or 20 megabits per second. So some of those considerations. The next use case is really around managing and incentivizing more connectivity in communities. So if we have this real-time data, which is from a probe or a Chrome extension or something that's collecting real-time data, can we then set up an oracle that's able to manage a certain set of rules with the connectivity provider? And that could be, if connectivity is met, pay the connectivity provider on a more regular basis. So maybe connectivity providers want to be paid on a daily basis instead of a monthly basis. But maybe we can also incentivize connectivity providers to provide more connectivity to a community. So if you provide 5 megabits per second more to a particular school region, you could increase the financial incentive for that connectivity provider. And so using oracles in that context to actually manage the relationship with various actors within the connectivity ecosystem, that's where we start to see a lot of opportunities. And then finally, once you have connectivity, that's really empowering a community with a new set of tools. And like we've said, we've talked about certificates, we've talked about decentralized work opportunities. All of those things can then be enabled once you have connectivity in a community.
That's great. Thanks, Christina. So Jonathan, we've been spending a lot of time together imagining some projects we could see being built in this category. I'd love to kind of spend a little time sharing our thinking on some of the projects we would like to see built, obviously with the caveat that to Jonathan's point earlier, please disrupt our ideas, please, think outside the box and bring us new solutions we can't even imagine. But a few of the ideas we're particularly excited about are, for example, dynamic NFTs powered by Chainlink VRF that incentivize and gamify education to reduce school dropout rates, DeFi solutions that use Chainlink's price feeds to increase financial access and solvency in emerging markets. We've talked a lot about this on the call today, but educational certificates, both formal and skills-based, that are recorded on-chain and universal passports. Jonathan, I would ask you, are there any other ideas that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, I think that also the developers could look into some use cases that exist in different sectors, and then it could be, adapted to educational challenges that we're facing as a result of COVID. So I wouldn't go too much in detail, but maybe also to raise that idea of maybe a technology or a use of blockchain that is being applied in a different sector could be transformed and applied to solve different challenges.
Cool, I'll open this one up. I mean, one other area that I'm super excited about and particularly interested is climate change and automated carbon credits. I think there could be a lot of interesting potential solutions built there. Maybe I'll open it up to this group. Christina or Val, do either of you have any ideas you're particularly excited about that you haven't seen being built in that you would like to see people building solutions in?
So for me, I think that especially in a hackathon context, coming up with a brand new model can sometimes feel really overwhelming if something hasn't been built before. But instead, I would challenge people to think about how can you take an application that's already been built and build it for edge cases. So build it for communities where an individual might not have access to the internet every single day. They might only connect to the internet one time a week. Or how do you build an application for a population who is not literate? So thinking about those use cases and then adapting them for various contexts. I think that also is very, very innovative, but also if you build for the edge, you're building for everyone. And that's really important.
Can I jump in?
Absolutely, Val.
Thank you. No, I couldn't agree more with Christina. So I think that is the key here. If you can build for the edge, you can build for everybody. So, and I would maybe invite the hackers that are here and with your brilliant ideas to think about the challenge that we have in education. So remember, before COVID, we have more than 600 million young people and children outside the education system, actually not learning the basics, mathematics and literacy. So if you add now the crisis we are living all together here, the COVID-19, so you can imagine how much deficit we have in terms of learning during this time. And then the second challenge is this 24 million people that potentially will drop out of the system. So you know that for innovation, we need big challenge. So I think we have here a huge one. So how we can take this into account and produce something that can support this community. And obviously we have inside this big group, we have subgroups like the refugees, the migrant population, that they have also a huge challenge again to solve. So think about them, how we can bring blockchain, smart contracts, innovation, and in a disruptive way to support this community. So how we can innovate in terms of for example, the recognition of their previous skills, that they had during their life and opportunities, doing their interactions with different jobs, but they don't have a regular certificate. How we can acknowledge that, or what would be other solutions that can bring more learning opportunities for this collective. So yeah, I think we can turn around and think about the big challenge and how we can support this community, and put our imagination in place, and also take into account some elements like, for example, diversity. So if you are working alone or with another person, try to bring, people from other background, women, bring women hackers to your group, because this interaction, I think, would make the difference in your solution. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Val. Really good advice there. So I think when we look at the cryptosphere as a whole, we're obviously pretty early adopters at this point and are now starting to see real utility and use cases across certain segments like DeFi, NFTs, etc. I think a lot of the work we've been discussing today is in this migration phase from proof of concept pilots to wider scale and larger scale deployments. Two questions. What do you think has been the limiting factor, i.e. without, to do DeFi, is always tough without decentralized oracles? And then what do you think are some of the major success stories of decentralized technologies in emerging markets? And Christina, maybe we'll start with you here.
Sure. I'm going to take this to a very non-technical place in terms of some of our limiting factors and some of what our successes have been. In terms of our limiting factors, our ability to translate the benefit of blockchain to non-technical people has been poor to date, to say the least. And we're often trying to explain what the technology is instead of what the benefit is. And I think that's something that we have to work to overcome and be better. We're all guilty of it. Using words like NFTs or DeFi even, when we're talking to our colleagues, they have no idea, or even just naming things non-fungible token. What does that mean to the average person, right? So we need to be more accessible in terms of our language and the way that we're presenting blockchain solutions. But we also need to make blockchain solutions more accessible from a UX UI perspective. So I shouldn't need to know all the intricacies of how seed phrase, private keys, and public keys work to be able to get started. Now, I should learn about those, but I shouldn't have to know the ins and outs of ZPub keys and XPub keys to get started. And so we need to create more accessible solutions generally. But then, as I mentioned, we also need to build solutions that are accessible to a larger group of people, like those who aren't frequently connected to the internet, those who live in a different context than those who are fully connected in the Western world using an iPhone. The reality is that most of the world doesn't use an iPhone. And so building on various platforms, building for various people, I would say those are some of the limiting factors we've seen. Now, in terms of successes, and if I look at particularly within the UN, one of the things that I've been really happy to see over the last little while has been building a community around blockchain. And I say that because there are two things I would highlight. One, which I think is one of the best kept secrets of the UN, is the UN Innovation Network. And this is open for anyone to join and to go on and see the resources of the UN Innovation Network. But it's thousands of people within the UN system who are interested in innovation. And there's particularly a blockchain group where they can go on and constantly learn and push the boundaries of innovation within the UN. But more than that, we've also launched recently a platform called the Atrium. which is an interagency blockchain between UNICEF, UNDP, and the world, UNDP and WFP, where we have hosted a platform that anyone can go on, search learning resources, so starting from the basic to the more complex topics. They can share the projects that they're working on. Particularly, we encourage open source projects so that not every group, agency, entity, we're all creating the same thing from scratch. We should be able to lift and reuse these open source projects, but also to be able to ask questions really honestly. Blockchain's not an easy space, and none of us would be where we are today if we didn't have intelligent colleagues and friends who were helping us stay on top of everything that's happening. So being able to have a platform and a community that's enabled by blockchain within the UN, that for me would be a big success that we hope that will continue.
Awesome. So building on Atrium and some of the ideas you were just sharing, and one of the questions I see on the YouTube chat box, this seems to be one of our more popular hackathon categories based off of some of the Discord chats and gather sessions I've been seeing. What advice do you have for teams who are serious about productizing their work and kind of furthering their projects coming out of this hackathon? I'll open this one up to the group. Do either any of you three have advice for how these teams should think about potentially engaging with your organizations or furthering this work?
I'm happy to jump in quickly. So two things that I would have project teams think about as they exit the hackathon. The first is around open source, and open source projects and being able to leverage the open source community, I think, is incredibly powerful. If you're looking for guidance around open source, there's a really great resource called the Digital Public Goods Alliance that is recently started at the request of the Secretary General and talks about what it means to be an open source digital public good. So that would be one reference point that I would say take a look at and try and work towards becoming a digital public good. And then the second would be the principles of digital development. And those are things like build open source, build with your users, do no harm. And so there's a basic set of principles that I would encourage the hackathon teams to look at and to try and work within those frameworks when you're looking at your hackathon project and how you're going to scale that.
Okay, great. Well, I know we've already gone over, but Val, were you going to jump in with one more?
No, it was just, I have the same point about the open source. I think obviously for the UN, this is a big issue. And for example, for UNESCO, we created the open education resource. So with this philosophy to create some public goods, I totally endorse what Christina just said. So this, I think it will be interesting when we look into the different proposals. But also in terms of the diversity dimension that I mentioned before, I think is important to see how the solutions were built and how the diversity came into place here as well. So yeah, just these two, and think about the challenge that we have in the education sector as well. Thank you.
Okay, well, great. I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you so much, Christina, Val, Jonathan, for joining us today. We'll try to make sure you guys are in the Hackathon Discord as well. And if anyone has any follow-ups, feel free to ping them to Patrick, Keenan, or myself, and we can get in touch with one of you as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and we will see you soon. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.